So in this video, we're going to go over how to manage mental overload and grow your business sustainably without burning out. So some of the things we'll cover is what leads to mental overload, what leads to burnout, the core story engine driving it all, the 4 story conflicts you need to identify to prevent them, and how to solve conflicts to manage overload and avoid that burnout. So make sure to take notes in the comments because it helps bring clarity to you and all the other people watching the video as well. So make sure to take those comments. So let's start off first with what leads to mental overload. So what leads to mental overload is open loops. So open loops are these things that stay in our brain, right? So imagine them as browser tabs. Each browser tab is like, okay, I have to clean the dishes. I have to finish this project. I have to go to this leadership meeting. All of these I have tos set up all of these browser tabs in your brain. So they're mental browser tabs. And each time you open them, you're taking up the processing power of your brain, right? Because the more you open, the more the brain goes, oh, we haven't closed this loop. We haven't closed this loop. We haven't exited out any of these tabs. So it just keeps building, and then you get overload. So where do these tasks and loops remain? So they remain in your subconscious cache. So just like your browser has a cache, and a cache being like it saves memory of these different websites and the cookies and all of that, it's saved, right? So it's saved in your subconscious. But what does that actually mean, right? So we're made of multiple parts or resource states. So think about how you act with your family. You act different with your family than you do with your business, than you do with your partner, than you do with your friends, or when you're doing a hobby, or even that childhood part that loves nostalgia, loves old movies and cartoons and stuff like that, right? These are all different parts that are within our brain. And these parts are physically represented by neural pathways in your brain, right? So you have your brain, it looks like a cloud, but then you have all of these neural pathways, right? And they are created as you grow up in life, right? So you have some childhood behaviors that you build. You have these coping mechanisms that you create as you go through life. And all of these neural pathways start connecting. And then so all of these different parts, so your family part might be this part here, business part might be this part here. It's just all these neural pathways from all of these behaviors and coping mechanisms we created. So by continuing to use those coping mechanisms, we're creating the new resources and parts. And as I explained here, they're created through dendrite and axon growth through neuroplasticity. So every time you hear neuroplasticity, it's like, oh, you have a growth mindset, things like that. Not only is it a growth mindset in terms of building skills and things like that, those skills can be from one of the parts that you have inside of you. So you have like your hobby part, and your hobby part is really good at drawing or writing or something of that nature. And so that's how these are developed. So their physical representations are these axon and dendrite neural pathways in the brain. So what about burnout, right? So burnout, what is burnout? Stress, decision fatigue, lack of time for other resource states, right? So if your business part takes over your conscious all the time, all of those other parts, your family part, your hobby part, they're going to get fed up. They're going to get sick of it, right? Losing sight of your why. So why did you build this business in the first place? Internal conflicts between states. So I mentioned a little bit of that before. Like if you have one part that's always in the conscious, the other parts are going to get upset. They're going to be like, oh, I don't get to go out, and like the childhood part might not be able to go out and, oh, I want to watch the old cartoons again and stuff like that. But the business part just keeps taking over everything. Or your family part might be like, hey, we haven't like done any family trips or things like that because the business part is taking the conscious all the time. Like, what about me, right? So you get conflicts in that sense. There could also be a lack of alignment between you and your business. you could have outgrown the version of you that the business that created that business, right? So the business now has to grow to align with you, or vice versa. There has to be some sort of alignment. So these are all related to stories of those various conflicts that we mentioned, right? Each of those are related to a story. The story of the business taking over the conscious more than the other part, the story of your business not aligning with you, the story of your why. It's like those are all stories, which is why I call it the core story engine. The core story engine is basically the internal story conflicts that get mirrored in your external business systems. So we have a story conflict matrix. So there's 4 parts to this matrix. You have self to self, right? So that's like internal parts. You have self to tasks. So that's like when you have a task and you procrastinate, or you have whatever reasons to not do that task. It's some kind of internal thing against that task. It might be the wrong part is in the conscious, right? It could be that. It could be there's some sort of fear part that is preventing you from doing it. There could be a bunch of different reasons. Self versus business, right? So we mentioned you not aligning with your business anymore. That could be another story conflict. And then there's business versus task. So that's more the external side. So you have your business, but maybe the tasks that need to be done for the business, you don't delegate, or you don't have systems in place to do that. So how do we manage the mental overload? Well, the first thing is we got to close those loops, right? All those loops, they got to be closed. Instead of having these open loops, we need to close those. Those browser tabs need to be X'd out, right? We need to clear the cache. Clear that, all of those browser tabs, all that saved stuff here, we got to clear them out. Gives you more mental bandwidth. But how do we do that? So I have this S3 method here, which is simplify, standardize, systemize. So the first part is to simplify. We have to gain clarity on why, and if you need to, have that loop open. And we can do that with the IDEA method. So the IDEA, IDEA. So that stands for innovate, delegate, eliminate, and automate. Right? So whenever you have an open loop, so let's say one of your open loops is this project that you have to complete, right? So you have this project. So through this process, we first say, okay, let's innovate. Is there a better way to accomplish the task for this project, right? If yes, then let's figure out what that better way is. So a more efficient way. If no, what's the next thing? Can we delegate it? Is there a task in here we can delegate to either AI, to an employee, to a contractor, right? Because then you could close the loop for yourself and have it open for someone else. The next part is to eliminate, right? Are there tasks in this project that we don't really need to do, right? Because maybe there are things that it could be just busy work. But if you sit down and actually think about it, what are the things that you can get rid of? What are the things that you can eliminate, right? Then after that, we get down to automate. So these tasks here, are there any of these tasks that we can automate, right? Through AI, through remote process automation, things of that nature. So that's how we go through the idea process. So once we get through that idea process, next is to standardize. You got to get your thoughts and tasks out of your head and into SOPs. So SOPs are standard operating procedures. SOP. So you want to write down these things, like if there's things that we said we can delegate or automate, let's write down exactly what those repeatable steps are, so that way it gets out of your head and onto paper, so you can close that loop, because now it's on paper. You don't have to keep remembering how to do a step or how to do this task. Then we get to systemize. So this is where we actually do the delegation. Delegate the task to AI or someone else to buy back your mental bandwidth, right? So that's very important. So that's how we manage the mental overload. But what about the burnout? So for burnout, what part of the story quadrant prevents you from doing that top method, that S3 method? Is it self to self? Because if you have a conflict between parts of you on whether to delegate it or if it'll work, that could prevent you from doing the S3 method. Or it could be self to task. You're procrastinating writing those SOPs or writing things down and sitting down and just simplifying things. There could be self versus your business, where you don't even enjoy what your business is anymore, right? That could be a big problem, because then why would you want to create a system for that? You lost your why, and your identity no longer fits what you built. So then you'd have to fix that before you can even create this system to help with your mental overload. Then it's business to task. So you don't have anyone to delegate the task to. Either you don't know how to delegate it to AI, or you don't have an employee or a contractor right now that you can delegate those tasks to. So you got to tackle those story quadrants, those story conflicts, right? So if it's self versus self, that internal conflict, you have to find out what each part wants and negotiate between those parts. If it's self versus task, you got to lower the threshold of action. What does that mean? So that means if you have to sit down and write the SOP, for example, right? Instead of saying, oh, I got to write the whole SOP, right? Instead you say, I'll sit down in front of the computer for 5 minutes. That's it. 5 minutes. And then I'm going to sit there. And then as you sit there for 5 minutes, you're going to end up being like, okay, well, there's nothing to do. Let me just start the SOP. And then you start doing the SOP, and then you start getting into that flow state. And then by the time you're done with it, you're like, oh man, I completed the SOP. It's done, right? But you started with that lower threshold of action because you have that part, that's one part. You can have that part go in front and just be like, okay, I'm going to do this. The other thing is you got to make sure you have the right part in place, right? Because you have, like I said, there's different parts. So you would want a part that likes to write or likes to create systems and things like that in your conscious mind when you're sitting down in front of that computer. So make sure the right resource or part is in place for that task, because that'll make it a lot smoother. Then you have self versus business. So you got to find out what each part of you, because you have a team of parts inside of you, find out what each part wants and bring them together as a team. You got to be the leader of your internal team. And then you align your business goals with your internal team's goals. Okay, they got to align, otherwise your parts are not going to want to do anything. Then you have business versus tasks, where we simplify with the IDEA method, innovate, delegate, eliminate, automate, standardize with those SOPs, and then systemize with AI or people, right? Employees, contractors, things of that nature. And then that is how you do it. That's how you manage mental overload and grow your business sustainably without burnout. But if you would like more help, you could just click the link in the pinned comment or the description to reclaim 5+ hours a week in your business, overcome internal resistance, take guilt-free vacations while scaling, all without your business falling apart.